Hey, SnowTrax, SuperTrax YouTubers, we're back again with another walk around, and I gotta say that some of you out there must really be enjoying this. We're having fun doing it because the last two walk arounds, which were on XC Indies, a 600 and an 850, so far got 75,000 views. So we're really appreciative of that, and thank you for tuning in and watching this stuff. So we want to talk about today the all-new 150 horsepower turbocharged 900cc ace-powered XRS Renegade 137, and it's a pretty sweet ride. And we've already done a walk around at Heydays. AJ did on the grass there, but we thought it would be important to update that information with actual impressions after having ridden the sled and put some miles on it. So I've been riding it quite a bit since we got it back in late November. But I went out day before yesterday and put on 120K. That's about 70 miles for south of the border types. And just to refresh my memory so that I'd be able to communicate with you some of my impressions. And once again, these are my impressions, they're not yours. But hopefully I'll give you some basis for comparison and some issues to talk about. So what we got here is we got a G4 wide body. That's what they call it. It's wider in the beak, wider in the nose, because you've got an intercooler tucked under there. You've got a turbocharger sitting right about here. We'll talk a little bit more about that when we pull the side panel down. So this is a modified G4 bulkhead. They call it the wide body. Makes sense because it is wider in the front quarter than the G4 two-strokes. Some people think it's more appealing. Some people think it's a little boxy. I kind of like it. I like the look of it. It's not quite as downsloping as the G4 two-stroke bodywork is. Okay, so it's an XRS, so it's got all the wannabe stuff on it, and for all you wannabes, you pay the premium to have this stuff, but it's pretty nice equipment. You've got the Super Slick KYB compression and rebound adjustable shocks up front. Your compression adjuster, turn this right down to 0 to start off when you get your sled. That's the rebound adjuster. Don't get caught messing around with that or you'll be in trouble. I'm serious. Unless you understand how this works and experience the changes that this makes, which are profound as you turn this clicker up and down, there's a big difference generated in ride quality by fooling around with this. So don't start fooling around with that yet. Maybe we'll talk about that in another one. Back here, you've got Ski-Doo's, because this is an XRS, you've got, and it was early ordered, you've got this adjustable torsion spring preload. This increases the preload on the pigtail end of the torsion springs by turning this in. It's a hydraulic actuated thing. It's pretty doggone slick. I mean, Ski-Doo doesn't do too much that's wrong. They are very, very innovative. I am told that the actual cylinder that picks up the pigtails in the back of the torsion springs, at the back of the torsion springs inside the rails, that actuator actually came off of a Sea-Doo, the Sea-Doo model, the GTX, that has the hydraulic suspension on it. That's where they got that from. That's what I'm told. Okay, on the other side, one more adjustability issue is your compression dampening on your rear KYB right here. Leave that backed off to start, and then if you're a little overnourished, put 1 or 2 clicks on it. If you're slight and not very heavy, put it right down to 0 and start there. And then ride it. Ride it the way you like to ride. Not go out and try and clear 70-foot doubles. Ride it the way you would ride it on trails or in ditches, and then make your adjustments from there. You're probably going to end up like at 5. There's still an abundance of compression dampening here that you are never going to need to explore, unless, of course, you're obsessed with being Tucker Hibbert, and you're probably not. So a couple things we want to talk about that are interesting. Let's go back to the front and talk about the tunable skis. Okay, so you know how these work. This turns the carbide down, makes it protrude further from the keel of the ski. This makes it protrude less. You can adjust them up or down to your heart's content, but what you will find is what we find is that unless you put them down a long, long way and turn this thing way down, unless you do that, there is quite a measure of understeer or push in the front end, particularly at higher speeds. The turn-in is not as positive as the speeds go up unless you put these all the way down. The negative with that is that they carve down into the gravel if you're in minimal snow, But worse than that is the sled can hook. So when you put them way down, you'll get the turn-in back. The initial bite and the turn-in will come back. But the ski, the outside ski, will tend to overbite and then lift the inside ski because you're going from understeer to a profound oversteer situation. So then you back them up, you turn these off and bring the carbide back up into the bottom of the ski or closer to the bottom of the ski, and then you get the pushback. We rode a 600R G4, had a limited build last winter that came with 5.7s, and it was remarkable how linear and predictable the turn-in was compared to these. These are cool, and if you get a day where you're touring and you're in like 6 inches of fresh snow and it's just like powder running on hard packed trails, and you know, you just push and slide, put them all the way down, and they're like giant keels, and they really work great in those kind of snow conditions. But there is some issue there. A lot of guys like them, so bless your heart if you like them, use them. But the 5.7s to me just feel more precise. Okay, let's look under the hood and talk about the motor for a little bit. Only 2 fasteners to open the fenders, not 3 like is on the G4 2-strokes. Now you can't see the P-drive clutch, but let's talk about that briefly. This is an outstanding, innovative, industry-leading primary clutch. It's located under there, obviously. You can see that the belt drives uphill, that the secondary is literally on top of the primary. The thing to keep in mind about the P-drive is this, that it is a roller tower clutch. It does not have sliding buttons. This is super cool because sliding button clutches, the more horsepower you put through them and the higher the speed and the more horsepower the engine is producing in any given situation, the more friction the sliding buttons have on the torque towers. With this, you have rollers that roll up and down the torque towers. The easiest way to describe the benefit is exactly the same benefit as we received when we got the roller cam secondary, and went from sliding buttons on the secondary, and that's been around for, well, golly, over 10 years now, maybe closer to 15. But when we got roller cam secondaries, we got great backshift. Now you get great upshift and backshift with the roller tower primary P-drive, and with this is called the BOSS secondary, which stands for, wait a minute, acronym time, ring the bell, built on secondary shaft. That's what it means, BOSS secondary. Anyway, it works really well. You can see we don't have a spare belt, which is pretty stupid. But we have someone, or we have one somewhere around in the shop to put on it. And you should always carry one. Yeah, just anecdotally, this is the mass air sensor or throttle body located here in the turbocharger. And I know we're not giving you very good angles because we're not going to take the belt guard off. I got stuck doing that last year and made an idiot of myself. Up here, the turbo is located right on the front of the left corner of the triple cylinder exhaust manifold. That's where the turbocharger sits. So needless to say, this thing has got a lot of ventilation. Take a look at all the holes in the hood to let air in and to let air out. And so there's a lot of heat associated with the turbocharger. And from what I've seen and what I've experienced so far, even riding on relatively warm days, the bodywork has been designed to handle the heat, and I don't see big problems with that, even though G4 2-strokes have had some issues with belt heat, and certainly there's more engine heat from a turbocharger and intercooler than there is from a 2-stroke. But thus far, it doesn't seem to be an issue, so we'll give them props for that. Okay, so one other thing I want to talk about, and when you do things really well, when you do something that's not so good, it really shows up. If you do things kind of not half good most of the time, then people just go, yeah, well, that's the way it is. So Ski-Doo does so much right all the time. I still continue to ask why they have this very non-intuitive, awkward working electronic throttle. So here's the issue, and Devin's going to zoom in here and show my hand. When you're standing up and riding a portage or riding a ditch and standing up, you want to be able to put your thumb on the throttle. When you put your thumb on the throttle, this throttle is so genuinely jumpy that you can't give it steady throttle pressure. Now you can turn back to eco mode or to, there's 2 modes, sport and eco, and that'll numb up the throttle response, but you don't want to do that when you pay what you pay for this sled with a turbocharged 150 horsepower motor. You don't want to dumb it up. So this is how you ride it when you're riding trails and you're sitting down. You have to put your hand like this. You can't ride like this. You have to ride like this, because there's no place when you've got your thumb on the flipper to put your thumb so you can get in close to the controls. You see what I mean? This blocks it off. And the reason it blocks it off is because the pivot bolt is behind the handlebar. Every other throttle known to man on a snowmobile has the pivot bolt right there, and the flipper is unrestricted. All this stuff is out of the way. Yeah, so I don't like this throttle. I like this snowmobile, but I don't like this throttle. For those of you who care, you can do this, and you can pretend you're riding a Sea-Doo, and I don't like that at all. I like riding my Sea-Doo, but I don't like riding my snowmobile like it's a Sea-Doo. Ski-Doo uses the same braking setup on the 4-stroke turbo as they do on the G4 2-strokes. And it's a hydraulic brake, obviously, that's mounted on the drive axle, not on the jack shaft. And it's a Brembo brake, which is a super high quality kind of, you know, exotic kind of name for a brake. And it is a good brake. However, it's not our favorite brake. We would like to see more modulation, more depth of modulation in the brake. It does the job. You can ride the sled fast and hard. You can get into corners deep, and it'll do the trick. But it's not as good as some brakes on the market. And I think there's room for improvement on the brake. Okay, so you've got adjustable handlebars, very slick, and they work really nice. This is a really strong riser. We've had no problem with these. This is the 3rd year they've been in production. Works great. Switchgear, industry standard. It's beautiful. Everything is tracked. Your heaters are tracked in the digital display. You've got an analog speedo and tach that are there all the time, and then you can cycle through a ton of info. Oh yeah, we don't want to get you upset at us. So we better start it and let you hear it run. Here we go. So the engine engages at 2,900, really, really low. Certainly no 2-strokes that we know of in the market today engage that low. It shifts out at about 75, 50. That's as high as it revs. It makes power from the moment it squeezes the belt right through to shift RPM. This thing accelerates like a tractor. It really pulls hard. I was able to get it up to, the lake is starting to get good for top end runs. It's not perfect yet, but I got 170K. That's 106, 107 miles an hour for those of you on the south side of the border. And I don't think it's completely broken yet. Oh, I'm not supposed to say that. Don't do that. Don't hold it wide open if it's not broken yet. Only begin to do that. Okay. It's a nice sounding exhaust cadence. It's pleasant to the ear because it's 120-degree firing, 120, 240, 360. One circle of the crank revolution has 3 pulses. Auditory sensation is really pleasing. It's a nice sounding engine, and more importantly, it's really responsive. It takes throttle and turns it into thrust really quickly. It's a very, very nice, responsive, well-tuned package. One of the things that is really impressive with it is how you can run it up to, say, 70 miles an hour, 120K, and level off, and then when you dip back in and jam it wide open, it backshifts and brings the RPM right back up to 75 right away. That's the P drive that's doing that, and the backshift, of course, is aided by the secondary as well. But the upshift and the backshift are really, really positive on this. It's a job well done by Ski-Doo. Okay, so this has RAS front end on it. It's Ski-Doo's same front end that's on the G4 2-strokes. It responds to bumps well, goes through ditches well, and it would be the 2nd best handling front end in the business next to the Polaris. In the back end, you have the industry standard R-Motion. The R-Motion is, what do you say about it? It's been 10 years in the business, and Polaris finally got around to copying it this year, or to making something that was competitive with it. And this is a great suspension. This is the ride you want. You can custom tune it. If you put a 2-up seat kit on it, all you do is bump up the preload on the torsion springs with that thing. Bob's your uncle. It's a really good system. One of the things I wanted to talk about this sled, and in snowmobiles in general, is the fact that Ski-Doo is like super smart in having the deal they have with Camoplast to put ice rippers or make ice rippers available if you snow check or early order or spring break, whatever you want to call it. This has got an ice ripper on it. You know, in this day and age, with snowmobiles producing 150 plus horsepower, some up to 200 horsepower, not delivering it to the consumer from the factory without some kind of steel carbide traction aid in the track is not a good idea, because these things can get sideways at like 90 miles an hour, 150K, like that. And these tracks make a real material difference. Now, for all you drag racers and guys who want to hook up like a cat on a screen door, no, an ice ripper doesn't do that, but it provides an increased measure of safety, particularly directional stability, keeps the back end from passing the front. It gives novice riders, women riders are so much more comfortable with an ice ripper track, and we've seen this time and time again. This is a smart move, and hats off to Ski-Doo for making it available, because you can't get a factory installed ice ripper track on any other snowmobile other than Ski-Doo right now, and I'm hoping that that's going to change. It's that important. It's a safety issue is what it is. Okay, so overall, I think we've covered pretty much everything there is to talk about on the XRS Renegade. Keep in mind that all turbos come in 137, so the Enduro is actually a Renegade. It's a 137. They don't produce this sled in a 129, or this motor in a 129. They produce this sled in a 129 with a two-stroke, but not with the turbocharged motor. It's a smart move. I mean, it can't get enough traction the way it is now. It'll tear out the track at 75, 80 miles an hour, like 130, 140K. It will break the track free under the conditions we have now. And in fact, I think that's what's limiting its top end. I think it should go over 110 miles an hour. But I think it was still slipping a little bit when I was running at 170K, 106, sorry, US miles per hour. So there's the XRS Turbo Renegade, and that's all we can tell you about it until we get more information. So thanks for watching us, and tell your friends to tune in and see what's going on. Thank you.